Welcome to Building Your Best Brain podcast. I'm excited to share this episode because this is my second interview with a brilliant scientist, Dr. Claudia Belliveau. And what's extra special is that because we're both in Montreal, she braved the winter to come to my little plateau apartment. And so if you're watching this on YouTube, you'll see us in a sunny little corner. And if you're listening, you'll hear references to my cat Alto because she made quite a few appearances throughout the episode. But this conversation was incredibly fantastic. And it's really great for, people that are in grad school and navigating the world of academia and science. But Claudia and I talk a lot about communication, confidence, mindset, the art of celebrating, which is really great for anybody, any stage of life. So I want to introduce to you a little bit about Claudia, and then we'll dive right into the episode. I don't want you guys waiting much longer. But as I mentioned, Claudia is a recent PhD grad in neuroscience at McGill. She is extremely well known in the social media space. She has an incredible account where she talks a bit about scientific communication, productivity, about grad school life, as well as the transition out of grad school into the business world, into the pharmaceutical industry. She has a scientific consulting firm, which she has started throughout her PhD and continues to, where she does a really beautiful blend of bringing science to everyone in a way that is accessible. And we talk a lot about that and the art and the science of communicating complex concepts. Without further ado, we are going to get started. Welcome to Building Your Best Brain podcast. I have the absolute pleasure of interviewing the one and only Claudia Belliveau in person. So welcome, Claudia. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here.
So before we kick off into the podcast, I have to share how I've actually met Claudia. It's kind of a cool story. So it would have been 2 years ago through social media. So I was hosting a mind-body challenge, and I think it was like a 3-week challenge, and I had a bunch of prizes. And Claudia, who I didn't know at the time, participated, and you actively participated like every day for the 3 weeks, doing like push-ups with the bands and like downward dog with blocks.
I was fit back then.
And you won the last prize. You won the last prize, and that's when I found out that you were in Montreal, also doing your PhD at McGill in neuroscience. So I just like hopped on the metro, delivered your prize, and have been following you ever since.
Yeah. And I've also been following you since then. I think that's how I found your account, if I remember correctly. Yeah, I won like a yoga wheel.
Yeah.
I'm not very good at it still, but it's fine.
The yoga wheel's kind of tricky.
Yeah.
Because
it's nice to just lay.
Yes, exactly. Before we dive into the specific questions about, brain, productivity, PhD life, stress, all that fun stuff, I love to do a little kind of random icebreaker that has absolutely nothing to do with it. So the icebreaker is, if you had to pick one meal that was healthy, that you had to eat every single day, that you weren't allowed to be bored with, what would that meal be?
Okay, healthy in what sense? Like, has all of the macronutrients or not all of them?
There's clearly one that you're trying to avoid. Well, I guess ideally that would have everything to be healthy, in the sense like you can't pick like mac and cheese for like one meal.
Okay, so I would have to say, I don't know actually how healthy it is. Maybe you could tell me, but I love shish taouk. So like, chicken shish taouk with rice and potatoes and salad.
Ooh.
So I feel like maybe there's a little bit of, excessive carbs in there, but I feel like it has vegetables, it has meat, it has carbs.
Yeah. I guess you're thinking because of the rice and potatoes.
Yeah, like maybe it's a lot.
I
guess one's a grain.
Yeah, exactly. One's a grain, one's a starch. They're two different.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, everybody's different. Like, we get so much information online about, different ways of eating, different proportions of eating.
Yeah.
But I'm a firm believer that, like, background genetics has such a big influence, right? Like, you and I can eat the exact same things and we can control for so many variables, but we'll respond differently because our genetics are different. So, I've never heard it though. Shishka, how do you say it?
Shish taouk.
Shish taouk.
Yeah,
what
it's
kind
like
of cuisine?
I think it's Lebanese.
Lebanese?
Yeah. It's like Amir or what's the other place? Bustan, for example. Those are a little oily, but the idea is like seasoned chicken.
Seasoned chicken with all the other fixings.
Yeah.
No, and this is good because you can switch out a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
For me, it's pretty similar. I mean, I call it a Buddha bowl, but it's very similar. It's like rice, some sort of meat, and then you put in like avocado, different vegetables, and you kind of like mix it all together.
Yeah.
And I figured,
sounds good.
Yeah, it's like enough that you're not going to be super bored.
Yeah. Or starving.
Yeah, you don't want to be hungry.
Yeah.
Healthy and hungry is not it.
No,
if you're healthy, you're not hungry.
Yeah.
I would love to kick off a little bit with your journey. So you certainly don't have to go all the way from like when you were born, but I'd love to know, how you got in to neuroscience, kind of, a bit about your education journey, as well as you started a very successful science communication account, and kind of what was the birth of that and where you are now.
For sure. So huge topics. Okay, so I guess I will start a little bit, not from birth, but I guess growing up. This is kind of how I found myself in neuroscience. So growing up, I grew up with 2 parents, 2 sisters, a very healthy family home. And my sister experienced chronic depression. And so this, led her to move out at a young age and kind of face the world on her own. She didn't want support from us. And so my goal throughout undergrad was really trying to understand why. Why is her brain different than mine when we grew up in the same environment, same house? That kind of led me to my minor in my undergrad. So in undergrad, my bachelor's degree, I studied anatomy and cell biology with a minor in psychology. And so in psychology, I really tried to understand more about the brain, how it works, and sometimes how it could just be different for some individuals. Yeah, and then basically during my undergrad, I was like, okay, I always wanted med school. I always wanted to be a medical doctor. But my grades did not allow it from CEGEP and whatever, here I am. I decided to take a summer research position, so just volunteering in the lab, and I loved it. And I chose this lab based on the topic. So we were looking at postmortem human brain, so brains of individuals that died with depression. And so these individuals died by suicide. And so just working in this lab, I learned a lot about the brain, not necessarily my sister's brain, obviously, but just in general. And this, volunteer position in undergrad really showed me how much I love the brain, how much I love psychology, psychiatry, like kind of the whole mix of it. And so I decided to do my master's in this lab as well, and then transitioned to my PhD. So I really just followed my passion, I would say, and it led me to this lab. I tried other labs also in mental health, and I just really fell in love with this lab specifically, the Meshwar lab, for anyone who's interested. That's kind of how I landed in neuroscience. And then just during my degree, I really wanted to just do other things, follow my other passions. And so something I realized I love is talking about my research. More than actually doing it, I really loved presenting it. I loved, I did Neurolingo, which is like a training program to how to communicate science and give like TED Talk presentations. And just all of these experiences really led me to love sharing science. And so I would say in 2022, I guess I had 2 years left of my PhD without really knowing I had 2 years left.
I know.
I wasn't like sure how long I had left. I started an Instagram account. It was not my first time content creating. Like I had like an ASMR Instagram before that did not take off.
Really?
Yeah, like kitchen ASMR, like packing groceries and stuff like that.
Is it still on there?
It's there, but yeah, we're not gonna
follow it. Yeah, sorry, continue.
I don't post anymore, but so I just also loved kind of being in front of the camera, doing things, sharing stuff with people. I like producing content more than consuming it, I'll be honest. I was like, okay, why not share my other passion? So other than ASMR, like, let me share my science passion. And so I started the account. I started originally like taking audience questions. So like one question was like, why does your tongue burn? So not very neuro-based, but why does your tongue burn when you eat pineapple? So that was like my first like side post that I made. Now there's like, why do you black out when you drink too much alcohol? What's going on in the brain? And so these were like, carousel posts, very like infographic. Like I had to read a lot of papers just to put together the one post. And I was like, okay, this is a lot of work. So I was not consistent. I was not, producing at my best. And then around 2023, I was like, okay, like I have 1 year left kind of. I knew I was graduating. I was like, if I want to get in this niche, which is like science, PhD life, grad school, productivity, motivation, kind of a bit of everything, I was like, now's the time. And so I just started sharing more about what I know, what I don't need to research. I realized like from training a lot of undergrads that there was this like missing like info, like there's this missing like key to how to succeed in grad school that no one really shares, or not that many people share. And so that's kind of how I started the Instagram, and I think how it became successful, just because I shared what I knew, which people were asking me already in real life.
Yeah. I totally get that. Thank you for sharing about your family and your sister.
Of course.
And it's interesting because my gateway into neuroscience is super similar. So I come from, a family with a colorful mental health history. And I did experience some trauma younger. And so myself, I was also curious about, well, how did this impact my brain? So, I went in, and it's fine. Like I say I went in selfishly. I mean, I went in curious, exactly.
Yeah.
Your interests are what your interests are.
Exactly.
And I fell in love with research as well. It's funny that you share a bit about, hi Alta. I told you she was going to come and join us at some point. That you share kind of how, at the last year of your PhD, you're pursuing your passions and you decide, well, I'm just going to share what I want to share, but I don't need to research hours to share, because I feel very, very similar. I am also in the last year of my PhD.
We hope
we pray. And there's just so much knowledge that you know already, right? Like why share anything else? Oh my goodness.
Well, also. Yeah, for sure. I think it's also something to mediate the creator burnout. Like if you're sharing things that happen in your daily life or things that you encounter on the daily, then you don't need to like put, it's not effort, but you don't need to put so much thought behind it. Like you can just think of the creativity aspect because you already know what you want to talk about, or like you just talk about what happened in your day, for example.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a part of the reason why that works really well for you, which I find interesting, is because you are a strong communicator. So is this something that you have naturally always been, or is this something that you've done specific things to improve on?
I would say probably it's been a little natural. Like, I mean, you can probably tell from my voice. My voice carries, I have a decently strong personality. In high school, CEGEP, I was in all of the plays, like school plays.
So were you a theater person?
I was.
Good for you.
I was also in robotics, so I was like,
theater, robotics.
Dual personality.
Love it.
Yeah, so I would say it's definitely kind of inherent. But I have worked on it. So I've taken training programs. I've taken, I guess not really courses, but like little seminars, like lunchtime seminars, like how to create an impactful presentation, or how to use storytelling in your presentation so that things are interesting. so that it's not just like, here's the info.
Yeah.
It's like, here's the story, get emotional, relate to the content, remember the content, stuff like that.
I also find it interesting, and we can get into a little bit of the balance between PhD and content creation, of course, because as we both know, a PhD is incredibly unique, that your supervisor, and the science, which is unknown, is really what dictates how it's going to go, and that's a whole other ballgame on its own. That moment where you realize that it wasn't so much the research that got you excited, but communicating the research that got you excited. So if you can tell me a bit about that, and also some of the things you have learned in doing that, because as somebody that does that as well, I definitely come up against challenges and things that I struggle with.
Yeah, so I think the switch for me, it's not really a switch. I still liked the research. I was still, into it. I still wanted to find out the answers to my questions, like, inherently. But I think it was really just seeing how the audiences felt kind of validated, I would say. So let's get a little bit into my research, I guess, so that it becomes a little bit clearer.
For sure.
So, yes, I studied postmortem human brains, so brains of people that died by suicide. And a kind of extra layer that I was interested in was how early life stress, like childhood trauma, can shape and change the brain. And how and why is this so correlated with the outcome of suicide?
Yeah.
And so sharing that research with a general audience, one, is heavy. It's a very difficult thing to discuss. It's impactful. So I've had a lot of people come up to me after these seminars saying, like, this is the first time I hear somebody talk about how it's not my fault that I'm this way, know? And so they feel very validated. And so that was really something, like the audience's reaction to me sharing my research was, I think, one of the main things that drove me to want to keep communicating it. I'm not sure if I studied something different, if it would have ended up in a different way, but just this is what happened. And then I kind of forgot the second part of the question.
No, that's okay. Yeah, what was the moment in your PhD that led you to want to share science, or at least figure out how
to go
gratifying or passionate? And then, what are the challenges that you find in science communication?
Oh, yeah, okay. Yeah, so I would say one of the challenges that comes with that, so sharing specifically my kind of research, is when there's a lot of people who then ask for kind of help, let's say. But I'm not a psychologist. I am not, I'm not somebody who's trained in dealing with these things. So, and also sometimes there's, I can refer resources, basically. That was my kind of answer to people who wanted help from me specifically. And so that's one of the main challenges I think that I dealt with, is how to not feel like I let people down. Like, I wish I could help, I wish I could change somebody's past or show them how they can move forward, but it's just not what I'm qualified for. So not something that I felt comfortable doing. So that's one thing I would say was difficult to kind of get into. Another challenge with sharing science is trying to figure out at what level to share it. So, there's one thing I really love about sharing science is, like, you can go anywhere from explain to me like I'm 5, explain to me like I'm 10, explain to me like I'm a high schooler who is not in science. Like, there's so many levels at which you can communicate science. And I think that's kind of the tricky part, is like, how do I make it understandable but still interesting to somebody who already understands?
Yeah.
Because you don't want to only share your science with the lay audience who doesn't have any scientific background.
Yeah.
You want to kind of make it open to everybody. And so that's definitely something you have to tweak as you go through. Do I know the perfect recipe? No, I don't think so. I generally aim for, like, a younger high school, older elementary school kind of audience, but make real world examples. So it's still relevant to, like, adults, for example.
Yeah.
So I think those are the two main things, is like how your audience reacts to your science, and then how to actually deliver to your audience. Yeah.
Super interesting. The first part about the audience feeling seen. because it's interesting, you know, those that are really struggling with mental health, feeling seen is huge.
Yeah.
And you can at times not be seen by practitioners, right?
Absolutely.
And by your loved ones. So even though I totally get it, right? You're obviously not an MD or a clinician, right? But that is likely incredibly impactful.
Yeah. And I believe it as well. So I'll also be very candid. Like, I have my own mental health problems. I am not, you know, I don't think anyone doesn't have any mental health issues.
I totally agree. Yeah.
So I do have empathy, and I do kind of like feel what it's like. Like, for example, this was like one thing at Neurolingo, like I was on stage, I could see the audience, and then after they would come talk to me, but like I can imagine being in the audience and be like, wow, this person is talking about something that happened to me. It's the first time I hear about it. It's the first time I hear there's research on it. It's the first time I hear that people are trying to figure out what's different or what's changed, and you know, can we target this for treatment, or you know, like it's just, I think it, like I've been told that it gives like hope, you know, like it's like, wow, I thought nobody cared.
Yeah.
So I really do see the value in still communicating, even though maybe I can't, you know, give a therapy session or give the exact perfect answer of how to move forward for this individual. So
yeah, as you're doing your scientific communication, I find it so cute. Well, I get it. The like the level that you're hitting at, like just the way you explained it made me giggle. When I put in my my Instagram captions, I'll often run them through ChatGPT just to like clean up a bit of the error, and I always say write it grade 10 English level.
Perfect.
Because my Instagram account was a bit more kind of what you described, like general Q&A, you know, I would take hours to like look up research papers, and then I would use like the scientific jargon, which is not it. But I am paranoid, and I wonder if you share this paranoia too. Not that we want to like induce more stress, because we have enough to manage. But with the online content, right, it is extremely at times clickbaity, and I find almost too simplified with ulterior motives. Sure. So something that I worry about, right, when I'm sharing the tools that have worked for me, the tools that are research-based, that I'm sharing enough so that people can be informed and also realize that it's not like a catch-all, right? Sure. Like, we need lots of different things. There's so many different variables that you can't account for. And unfortunately, I don't always know if the intention of some creators are good. Yeah. You know, when they're sharing things that are science-backed, which sometimes they are, but they're presenting it in a way that...
it's like very black or white. But
yeah,
I definitely feel that paranoia as well, especially when I was really like science communication only. I was afraid, like, am I even putting out the right thing? Like, you know, like as a scientist, I know it's not black or white. So my fear is, am I missing like this little, you know, caveat that like in a certain population it's different, you know, like that's my fear as a scientist, and I feel like you share this as well. I think that's, again, like a fine line you have to walk, is like how much information do you give, how much do you hold back, or how much digging do you do to get the full picture. And I feel like as long as you give kind of like a disclaimer, like, hey, this is what I know, maybe it's not everything, but I am a scientist, I have training in this, you know, here is what I know, here's how I see it. I think as long as you're not saying like, this is, you know, doctrine, this is the law, this is exactly how it happens, I think you're kind of protecting yourself and your audience.
Yes.
But you are correct that there are creators out there, and I think generally they do well because they put this clickbaity stuff, and they're just like, here's how I'm going to solve all your problems. Here I'm going to solve your life. You know, like, here is how to do X, Y, Z for a happy life. You know, and people cling to that because they're looking for solutions. So it could be science-based for sure. But I think if you present any kind of science as black or white, you're kind of missing a lot of the story and not serving your audience.
No. And it's interesting because science, I mean, I'm not a huge fan of this. I think there's So something that we both know, being in the research space, right, is that there is a scientific method for many disciplines, social sciences included, but of course we'll stick with neuroscience because that's our domain.
Yeah.
You have your hypothesis, you have your controls, so as many variables as you can control, but also your control of what, a negative control where you expect nothing to be seen, a positive control where you expect to see something, and then your actual testing question. And you do it a number of different times with a number of different types of tissues, be it animal, human, participants, whatever. And you get a result that we deem significant based off of a number. And then we say, these results appear to be correct. And then there's new methods that come out, there's new tools. We retest it again, and sometimes the answer changes.
Yeah.
Honestly, the more that I get into research, the more I feel like science is almost philosophical in a way. Like we're just kind of measuring to the best of our ability with what we can measure now. And so with scientific communication, it's so... just with science in general, it's hard to come out with a clear message because I would never want to say, it's almost, I guess, paradoxical would be the right way of saying it. It's like, hey, like this is what we think is true now, grain of salt.
Yeah.
But we never want to say like, well, because this is the best that we can do now, it means it's not true, so just ignore it, right?
Yeah.
Like, so it's a bit difficult to be able to explain that nuance and to be able, I love what you say, to protect your audience in a way of saying, according to me, according to my perception, to what we can measure right now, this is what we're seeing.
Yeah, for sure. I understand, of course, going through a PhD, being in the research world. Also, I feel like just seeing how just the whole pandemic happened. Nobody wants to talk about it, but it's just how misinformation spread, like wildfire. People lost trust in scientists, things like this. I think it has a lot to do with that. So I think if you're not in research, specifically doing the nitty gritty, like trying to get all these controls, trying to make sure that your data is as real and as generalizable as possible so that it can actually be, representative of the world, let's say, which almost no science is, I think, unless it's like really huge, like meta-analyses or something. There's lots of cultural things that come into play. But I think what's important is just spreading that awareness, right? Like if you yourself are saying, hey, this is my knowledge, this is what I know, this is the best science we have right now.
Yeah.
And just say, if it changes, it doesn't mean it wasn't true. It was true at the time. If that message gets out to the general audience, I think that will protect our audience for the future. I think it's because nobody knew, they took science as fact, which it is, but it's fact in the moment. It's fact for what technology we have right now. It's fact for what participants were included, what groups of participants are included. Research is historically not inclusive, and we're doing better. We're trying to change this as like a community, as the research community. And I think we need to spread the message that, hey, this is what we know. This is why we think it's right. And if it changes because we did more science. It doesn't change because the science was necessarily wrong. It's just we learned more. I'm trying to think of like a good kind of example, but maybe just like with art, like when you're making a painting or something, you have to trust the process. You're going to be in like this middle point where your painting is like horrible. You have no idea where it's going. Like, will I like this at the end? Will I not? I feel like all of the history of science is kind of like that. We're in the middle point right now. We'll never be at the end. Yeah. We need to figure out where we're going.
That's so interesting. So after my master's, I worked in a startup company, and we had an expression which like makes me cringe, but it makes a lot of sense. Because, our timelines were tight and we were bringing out a product, right, that's like brand new, that like, there's so many unknowns. Pressure, so many unknowns. And we didn't exactly know how we were going to get there. And the CTO, the chief technical officer, always said like, we're building the plane as we fly it.
Yeah,
you know, so
exactly.
that's a lot of what science is about for sure. And there's no, like, the true scientific method, like, there's no ill intention. Like, we're really,
it's just exploring
and finding the truth.
Yeah,
which is the version of it right now.
Yeah. And I think something that really helps combat misinformation online that I find, like, how I decide if something is, like, right or wrong when I watch it, or not necessarily right or wrong, but just, is this real? Like, do I need to investigate more?
Yeah.
So it's like, when this product is going to solve your Alzheimer's disease, you know, like, as a scientist, I know that nothing exists to solve this problem. So when I hear somebody say this, the first thing that comes to mind if I wasn't a scientist was like, how true is this? You know, head to Google, quickly search it up. Is there a product that can save Alzheimer's? Look at good sources, you know, like NIH, look at like governmental organizations, WHO, World Health Organization, you know, look at Harvard, you know, they have a lot of science communication on their websites as well. And it's just the idea of going further than what you watch. So even when you watch my videos, when you watch your videos, look it up. If you're interested and if you think it's valid or not, look it up. Do more research. And it doesn't have to be difficult research, you know, it could just be like, type it into Google. Now there's those AI summaries at the top. I found them to be very good. I don't know if you have this feature.
I do, I love it.
I find them great, honestly. And they always link like the little resources on the side. So you make sure it's not coming from Dr. Nobody's website. You know, you look, it's like an organization.
Yeah.
And if it sounds too good to be true, it usually is. A scientist will usually say, here's what's best now, or here's what the research shows. They're not going to say, here is your solution.
Yeah.
From my experience, from what I've seen.
My experience too. And I love the idea that, you know, you can research after and it doesn't have to be crazy intensive, right? Because I mean, who wants to put in more work? But if there is something that you're curious about and you're really not sure, like, I don't know, then that's an absolutely great method. And I know you do this and I do this. We're totally fine sharing our references, right? And you and I make that super clear. And there's definitely other creators that do that too. So the things that you mentioned, like the NIH and some of the other resources, I'll definitely link at the bottom so people can use that.
Yeah,
I think
for
it's
sure.
a great way to combat misinformation.
Yeah.
So speaking of building the plane as you're flying it, I would love to know a little bit about your PhD experience, because that, I think, is the definition of building a plane
for sure.
as you're flying it. And I think what I'd like to know is, and especially related to, as you said, you shared your other passions, right? At one point it was ASMR, now it's the Belliveau science. How you managed to keep a kind of healthy level of productivity without burning out?
Yeah, great question. Great question. One of my favorite ways to explain how I went through life, honestly, is life is like a recipe, or like productivity is like a recipe. You have to try it. you try it out. Maybe it ends up being horrible and disgusting and it doesn't taste good. And then you need to change the quantity of, I don't know, flour, or honestly, I don't bake, or cook. So not like a best real world example, but you know what I mean? Like, you have to try the recipe a few times before you get the perfect outcome, you know? And so that's kind of how I went about life. So maybe just backtrack to my undergrad. That's where I really started testing, like, how do I do things other than school? What do I focus on? What's the main thing I want to spend my time on? And so I tried. My first semester of university, I only did school. I did not join any clubs, which was a huge contrast to my CEGEP experience, which is like between high school and university for anyone who's not from Quebec, you know, where I was in a ton of clubs. So I did nothing. I had the best GPA of my life. Like, it was great, but I was super depressed. I had a horrible time my first semester at university. I made friends, but I wasn't able to like feel that I made friends. You know, I was sad. I was just not well. I was very unhappy. And so the next semester I decided, okay, I'll join one club. So I joined that one club. I would not say that my grades suffered because that one club, but as I went through undergrad, my grades went down. I'll be honest, every year, every semester, they went less and less. They went worse and worse, but still good enough. I was still I was still able to get into grad school, let's put it that way. And so I just tried. By the end of my university experience, I would say, and like moving into my master's and PhD, I had to relearn it all. So going into grad school is very different than undergrad. So again, my first semester, I first of all suffered from a lot of imposter syndrome, which I think everyone kind of feels. No matter what you're starting, I think it's hard to feel like you deserve where you are or that you fit in. And so I tried again. I didn't join any clubs my first semester. I only focused on my research. I honestly stopped seeing friends. Like I really tried to focus on my class and my research. And again, super unhappy. My imposter syndrome did not get better. It did not go away.
It's funny how that works. Huh?
Yeah.
You think doing more of what you feel almost insecure about or not sure about is going to make it better, and it's often not the case.
Yeah. So again, second semester, well, first of all, I went to therapy, which was honestly life-changing. It brought me a lot of self-esteem. I really worked on my self-esteem, and that kind of really fixed my imposter syndrome. I was like, okay, wow, maybe I do kind of know something, and I'm just comparing myself to somebody who's been here for 6 years, Yeah, and so then as I became more confident in my research, I allowed myself to spread out and to try different things. One being content creation and this Instagram account. And so how I handle it, honestly, is my Google Calendar. You have to have good time management if you want to try these extracurriculars, even like not necessarily content creation.
Of course.
And I use my Google Calendar a lot. I always reprioritize. So every semester I would just be like, okay, what's my priority this semester? Do I have a class? Yes or no? Do I have a deadline? Do I have a conference coming up? Do I have a paper I want to submit? Mm-hmm. And then I just said like, okay, this semester, maybe I'm not going to see my friends as much. Maybe just once a week I'll do something with a subgroup of friends. Or, maybe this month my workouts take a back end, take a back seat. I just looked at my life and I was like, what's my priority? Mm-hmm. I made my priority my social media and my research and my friends. I would say those are the top 3, friends, family together. Yeah, so through all the recipe testing, I was not afraid to, put things on the back burner. I kind of learned and understood over time that sometimes you can't have it all and you need to prioritize. You need to choose what's your priority in the moment. So that takes a lot of self-reflection, I think. Something that you're amazing at teaching. So I think, all your followers are probably good at self-reflection.
It's I love the reshuffling and, like you say, reflection.
Yeah.
And I think, unfortunately, we do get pushed that we can do it all. And I think we often get pushed that we need to do it all right now.
Yeah.
Which is impossible.
Mm-hmm.
I certainly, throughout grad school, have found that, everybody's at a different journey and we get fed different things. And there is a tendency of, because the journey is so unpredictable, we want to do everything right now so that at least everything feels certain. And so something I love about what you shared is that doing more research did not help with your imposter syndrome. It was feeling secure in yourself.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I have a feeling, maybe I'm wrong, that you started doing less in your research, but started achieving more.
Yeah, I would at the beginning of my degree, I was coming in on the weekends.
I'm so there.
Yeah, I was working so hard and I was burning out for sure, feeling horrible about everything. And then once I started, not working on the weekends, I was more productive in the lab because I was like, oh wow, I only have 30 hours to get things done. So I'm more productive, less stressed that I need to come in on a Saturday morning and I can't enjoy myself. So I maybe just for legal reasons, I wasn't doing less. But, I definitely reprioritize.
Yeah, I guess maybe doing less is not the fair way of saying it, but not doing the most all the time.
And just like trying to live a balanced life. Yeah.
Yeah. And balance looking different at different spaces is
like
useful and accurate.
Yeah, and like you said, I truly don't believe anyone is doing everything all at once. Like it may look like it. Of course, you go on my social media, it's like, wow, like, I really do try to share the bad parts, but I focus, of course, on the good parts.
Also focuses on the good parts.
Yeah. Of course, looking at somebody's social media feed like mine, there's a lot of positive things on it. I, of course, try to share, the negative parts as well, but there's for sure this focus on the positive parts. And it's just like, I really think, like, keep in mind, you're not seeing everything. There are things that are going on in the background that are lacking. Like, I don't fold my laundry for like 5 days. Like I do share that on my stories, but you're not going to see a reel about it.
Yeah.
So I think what you mentioned is really important. It's like you don't have to do it all right now. Maybe my laundry gets done 5 days later, but whatever, it still gets done. That's not gonna change how my life moves forward.
Yeah. I think I have a similar fear with my account. I don't think you went as far as fear. I'll go as far as fear.
Okay.
Because I share things related to breath work and meditation and a lot about the neurobiology of stress, that I want to make sure people know that like I experience stress. Like it's not like the reason why I know all these tools is because I've used them, because I have to use them.
Yeah, for sure. I think there's no human experience that doesn't have some kind of stress.
For sure.
I think it's what, I think not even human experience, just being alive, I think is stressful. Like animals also experience stress.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
I think it's very normal.
It's a part of being alive. If we didn't have a stress response, then we would probably die.
Yeah, and we wouldn't know how to feel good either. You only know how to feel good because you know how to feel bad. So I think it's a beauty, I guess, of being alive.
Yeah, I totally agree. So, Claudia, I'd love to ask a few kind of questions to wrap up the episode.
Yeah.
So the first question, I have two. The first one is, what is a non-negotiable for you right now when it comes to your brain health?
I would say my non-negotiable is maintaining my positive self-talk. So like a big thing that I worked on in therapy, in my master's, in my PhD, like basically anytime I go to therapy, is like reducing the amount of negative self-talk. So I think as a type A person who, has very high standards for the work that I do and whatever, I think a lot of people can resonate with that. Yeah, it's just keeping my self-talk positive. And not necessarily overly positive, like, wow, you're the best. But like, I don't need to beat down on myself more than, let's say, failing makes me feel. Like, I don't need to add to it. So that's definitely something that's really brought me more stability in my mental health is just my self-talk. Yeah.
I love that. I love that so much. Thoughts are a huge part of our brain health. It is like, we just talked about how there is no like one be all and end all, but if I had to have a bucket of things that are super critical for brain health, thoughts are definitely one of them.
100%. Our most common like therapeutic devices are cognitive behavioral therapy. A lot of, and that's literally rewiring the way you think. It's like, is my thought rational or irrational? Is it logical or illogical? Am I just putting this on myself or is somebody telling me this,
Yeah, exactly. And the last thing that I'd love to ask you, she loves doing this at the very last part. She's like, this is my last opportunity to get attention on camera. Would be if there was one thing that you could tell yourself, like that you could tell your younger self right now with everything that you've learned, what would that one thing be?
Ooh.
I think Alsa's gonna join you. She's like, what's it gonna be, Claudia? What's the one thing?
I think the one thing that I would tell myself is like, you deserve what you, no, not what you get, because like there are bad things too, so what that I think the one thing I would tell myself is that you deserve the happiness. You deserve the good things that come. I think, speaking on imposter syndrome is like a lot of these, beautiful things that happened in my life took a lot of work.
Mhm.
Yes, they took luck, but it took a lot of work, and I should be able to, feel that and be happy and proud of like things that I've done. And I think that's something that I've always struggled with. It's like, oh, but is it really good? So, yeah.
I love that. And that links really well with the positive self-talk
Yeah.
too, is the celebrating.
Yeah.
And we didn't dive into it too much, but I attribute, well, your account is amazing and is helping a lot of people. I just observing you kind of like as a third party, I find that one thing you do really well among many things is celebrating your success.
Oh, yeah.
And it definitely inspires me, and it's an area that I'm working on, is to celebrate success. And it's nice to know that it stems from this deserving to celebrate and be happy.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really
Like,
beautiful.
I do really like celebrating all the small things, like, ooh, paper submitted, like,
I
time
love
for some
it.
champagne, because it's hard work.
It is
We
hard
could
work.
be doing nothing. We could be, in a totally different, like, situation. So, yeah, it's something I've really learned is celebrate small things. Yeah. And then it helps you, like, gain your own motivation, right? Because you're like, oh, I get to celebrate something if I do this, So,
Yeah, most definitely.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being the first in-person guest on Building Your Best Brain podcast. And I'm sure it won't be the last time that we chat and collaborate, but
sure.
thank you for your time and your energy. It's greatly appreciated.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure. And I hope, like you intended at the beginning, that we help somebody.
Yeah, one person, 1 minute.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you so much for your time and attention. If you have any questions about what Claudia and I chatted about, drop a comment below. And I look forward to the next time we get to talk about how to build our best brain together.